All right, so I decided to come back a little bit early. I was going to solve all three of them and then show you the answers at the end, but then I kind of realized it might be actually good for you to see me work through some of these. So I did this with number 4, so I'll kind of talk through what I did here. So first off, I tried to figure out what would give me a square root of 0 in my answer. And the only thing that would work here is I don't have to worry about the -4 or the -4 to think about that. I just have to look and see what's going to give me a square root of 0. Well, plugging in 0. So that's always going to be my first point that I use. So I'm going to use 0. And if I do that, I plug that in and I get 0 here, -4. 0 minus 4 is -4. Okay? Next. Now I'm checking which direction I should move. Should I start going down, going into the negatives, or should I go towards the positives? Well, I'm going to go towards the positives because those are going to give me real solutions. I get no solutions if I start plugging in negative numbers here. So we plug in 1. Square root of x is 1. 1 minus 4 is -3. Okay? Those two should be pretty easy to find. Next one, though, I'm going to need my calculator. So plug in the square root of 2. And we know this from the last couple problems, but the square root of 2 should be about 1.4. Okay? So I'm not going to press clear on my calculator just yet. I'm going to keep this number here, and I'm going to press my very next step, which once I have the square root of 2, now I'm going to do -4. So -4. And I get about -2 point, well, that rounds up to 6. So -2.6 is what I want. So that's why I wrote that here. So it's an approximation. Like I said before, approximations, totally fine for this. Okay? Next up, square root of 3. Press enter, and then subtract 4. Okay? -2 point, well, that's going to round up to 3. So -2.3. All right, that's what I have here. And then I don't really need my calculator for this next part. You can continue to use your calculator if you want, but some of these you don't really need your calculator for. Like I do that, and then I do -4, and I get -2 as my answer. Okay? So that's how I got the -2. So I plot those. I have those plotted here. And then the next thing I look at is I ask myself, what's the domain? What are all the possible x values I can have? So if I'm looking from left to right, I see that I have no negative numbers. So how do I describe no negative numbers? Well, I'm going to start at 0, right? So this starts at 0 on the x, right? If this is my x-axis, I'm starting at 0. That's my lowest x point, and then, or x coordinate, and then it's moving to the right. So it's going this way. So as I go along the graph, I have points all along the graph as I'm following the x-axis right here. Okay? So I write x is greater than or equal to 0. Next, I look at the y's. So now I'm looking vertically. What is the first point that I have vertically? Well, the first point starts at -4. Notice how this is -4 vertically, right? The y value is -4 here. And then am I going down or am I going up is more the question. Well, I'm going up. So if I'm going up the scale, if I keep my pen here and I'm following the y-axis, I'm going to have points all along this line going up, which means my answers can be greater than or equal to -4. This is the -4 right here. Okay? A good thing to do is to zero in on the point where you're starting and maybe even tell me what that point is. And a good thing to do when you label this is label underneath, that's your x, that's your y. This should correspond to where you're writing your domain and range, right? Domain is x values, range is y values. So that's why the 0 needs to be here and the -4 needs to be here, okay? And then you need to say, do your x values get bigger or do they get smaller? They get bigger. Do your y values get bigger or do they get smaller? They get bigger, okay? All right, let's do the next one. So we've got x, y. So I plug in I'm going to figure out what I need to plug in first for this one. Well, what's weird about this one is I actually am not going to plug in 0 first, because if I plug in 0, I get 5 as an answer in here, and then I'm taking the square root of 5. However, I can make it even smaller. I could go down to 4, right? Maybe I could even go down to 3. I could even go down to, or sorry, I don't know why I said I was going down just then. Instead of plugging in 0 here, what if I plug in some negative numbers? So if I plug in -1, I get -1 plus 5. Well, that's just 4. Okay, so let's keep going down until we get to an answer that'll give us 0. Well, what I can plug in for x here is -5. So if I plug in -5, I get -5 plus 5 is 0. And what's the square root of 0? 0. Now I ask myself, am I going to go up or am I going to go down? If I go down, I have -6. That's going to give me a negative answer in here, and I don't want a negative answer inside my square root. So I'm going to go up instead. Go up to -4. So if I go up to -4, that means my answer is going to be 1. If you don't believe me, plug it in, see what you get. -4 plus 5, 1. Square root of 1 is 1. And then you're going to notice a pattern here. This one actually kind of follows the same pattern as all the problems from before. You've got -1.4, -1.7, and I kind of ran out of room here, but I am going to plot the next point, which is -1, -2. But we'll do that here. I kind of ran out of room, which makes it a little bit harder to show what's going on here when I do that, when that sort of thing happens. Okay, so, oh, I should have drawn this over here more. That's okay. That's why it's important to predict what's going to happen. So using my prediction skills, I know I don't need to go very far this way because I don't have any values this way, but I do need to actually kind of go far towards the left. So I might have to make these notches a little bit smaller so I can fit everything, okay? And then we'll just make this small as well. And then that's all we have there. Okay, 0, -5, 0, -5, oh, I did that backwards actually. It's -5, 0. So -5, 0 is going to be right here. -4, 1. So -4, 1 is going to be right here. -3, -1.4. It's going to be right here. -2, -1.7. It's going to be right here. And then, like I said before, I kind of want to plot the last point that I didn't write down here, which would be -1, -2. Okay, connect all the dots. And you've got your sideways parabola, just 1/2 of it, going this way. Okay, let's talk about the domain and range. Domain, range. Like I said before, I'm going to zero in on my starting point, and I'm going to label what point that is. That's -5, 0. Okay, which means when I go to write my domain and range, I'm going to leave this blank for a second. I'm going to just fill in these values right here. This has to relate to -5 somehow, and then this has to relate to 0 somehow. Okay, now the equal to is going to be right here, because I can have -5 as an answer, and I can have 0 as an answer for y. Now I just need to decide which direction is it going. Are my x values getting bigger or smaller as I follow the graph? They're getting bigger. They're going this way. So I'm going to do the greater than sign. Now, are my y values getting bigger or smaller? Well, they're going down. My y values are going down, which means this is less than. Okay? So that's how we do number 5. All right, let's move on to number 6.